Hey everyone, it is late at night and I am Norman. It is time, once again, for some watch news. Tonight we'll be looking at some brilliant watches and a piece that doesn't even have a rotor in its movement. So let us begin. The first article tonight comes from Worn & Wound, and this was a review of a Schofield watch. Apparently the brand is 15 years old, and during all that time they've used the same 44mm case on their pieces until now. With the release of the Light GMT, we now have a smaller case size being put out by this brand. The dial and colorways on these watches are absolutely brilliant looking. I love the handset they went with for this. They're unique and just look great in conjunction with that dial. The GMT hand is super cool. It has a little dot on the end of it with a pop of red in it. The seconds hand also has some red on its tip. And if you look at the hands, they appear to be a really nice looking gray brushed color, with the GMT hand being a little bit lighter gray. The text on the dial is really cool. They didn't go with the text at the 12 o'clock position like you usually see. This text is over by the 4 o'clock, which kind of reminds me of the Helvetica watch, another amazing looking piece. The box crystal on this watch looks so great, and the font on the hour indices, yes. The crown on these watches is at the 4 o'clock. The cases are all brushed and utilitarian. These watches just look so good. The case size is 40mm. The crystal is sapphire. The movement inside these watches is a Seiko NH34 GMT movement. The lugs are 22mm. The lug to lug is 48mm. They have 200 meters of water resistance, and they retail for about $2,749. The next article comes from Fratello Watches, and in this article they're discussing some of the updates that Serica has been doing as far as the movements that they put in their watches. So I own the Serica 5303, and when I got mine they were still going with the Newton movement, and these had crown issues. So yes, I had to send my watch in to have its crown fixed, and at the time that I did that, it was a permanent fix. Prior to that, it was a little bit more temporary. So I kind of lucked out that I waited as long as I did to get that taken care of. But they've since moved to a Soprod M100 movement for these watches, and they also submit their watches for COSC certification now. And in case you don't know, COSC stands for Control Official Suisse de Chronometer. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that with the proper accent. Also known as the Official Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute, which is a non-profit organization that tests Swiss chronometers. So manufacturers submit their movements to the COSC Institute, and they test them to see if it meets their standards. These standards include an average daily rate of -4 plus 6 seconds, an average daily rate of -4 to plus 6 seconds a day, mean variation in rates 2 seconds, greatest variation in rates 5 seconds, difference between rates in H and V positions -6 to plus 8 seconds, largest variation in rates 10 seconds, thermal variation of plus or minus 0.6 seconds, a rate resumption of plus or minus 5 seconds. The next article I have comes from WatchPro.com, and this was an interesting article because they covered some crazy events during an auction and then wrapped it up with an homage watch. So there was a Rolex GMT with its bezel removed, and it was the famous Apocalypse Now watch, and it was up for auction. And due to these events, it became part of 100 auction items that were frozen due to a court order. Mohammed Zaman, the seller, has filed a civil case against Christie's, charging the auction house of a claim for avoidance in respect of an auction whose outcome has been influenced by unlawful or immoral means. According to swissinfo.ch, on the day of the auction, proceedings were delayed for nearly an hour after Christie's said a third-party guarantor had made a reserve bid for each watch in the collection. A reserve bid guarantees a minimum price for the lots, and the guarantor gets a portion of the fees for any watches sold above that amount. The low estimate on each watch in the sale was also changed, raising the total minimum bid price above 35 million CHF, or about $40 million, from about 19 million CHF previously. That meant any potential bidders who expected to be able to place bids at the low estimate prices printed in the auction catalog weeks before were out of luck. But there's an interesting homage watch for those who love the Apocalypse Now piece. And this piece is the Freeze 101 Mark II. The brand was founded by Simon Freeze, who prior to founding this company had 15 years experience as a watchmaker and a workshop manager with Swiss Time Services in Essex. So his watch brand was begun in 2018. This watch is super tooly and utilitarian looking. The dial on it is sort of a mill sub style, but it doesn't have a rotating bezel or anything, so it kind of has a similar aesthetic to the Apocalypse Now watch. The case size is 41 millimeters. The movement inside it is a Sellita SW200, and it sells for about $2,750. Next up, we have an article from Monochrome Watches, and this article is a write-up and review of a Hublot MP10 Tourbillon Weight Energy System watch. This watch kind of has a rounded rectangular shape, almost like a pill capsule, and the time is told on rollers, which are a lot heavier than hands, so they use up more energy. To provide this automatic watch with power, the displays are flanked by two gold weighted sliders. They slide back and forth, and there's protective bumpers on either side, just to minimize the impact. The time can be set by a crown at the 12 o'clock, and there's a third roller that is a power reserve indicator. This watch is super sci-fi looking. I'm sure that in person it's big and bulky, but in photographs it looks pretty cool. This would definitely be an amazing watch to try on and just see it on your wrist. The touch of color in the power reserve indicator looks really cool in contrast to the black and gray that the rest of the watch is. The movement that they developed for this watch took 5 years of R&D to come up with. And it has fewer than 592 parts in it. It's a pretty long watch, and it has an integrated rubber bracelet on it. The case width is 41.5 millimeters. The case length is 54.1 millimeters. So that would pretty much hang over the edge of my wrist. The case height is 22.4 millimeters. The crystal is sapphire. The movement inside this is the HUB 9013. And these watches retail for almost $300,000. The last article I have comes from Watches by SJX. And this article is showing off a line of Longines watches that have a center power reserve on them. All of the watches in this line have a great everyday wear style to them. Kind of dressy, kind of sporty. I really like the black dial with silver indices on it. That colorway looks great. I love the hands and the applied markers, and that they went with a date at the 12 o'clock. That's kind of cool. Typically you only see that with big dates, but these are normal little dates. And I really love that power reserve indicator complication. Having that in the center of the dial, it's kind of subtle and I think it looks pretty cool. And I feel like power reserve indicators on automatic watches are a very useful complication. If you've worn the watch for a few days, but you're going to be wearing a tool watch or a dressier watch, so you put it on the shelf, you can actually check that power reserve and know how much energy is in it. Usually with automatic watches, I'm just kind of in the dark. I don't own a watch winder, so if I want to keep a watch awake, if it's an automatic, I may have to do a little bit of winding or the Seiko shake for a while, but I just never really know how much power it actually has. The case size on these watches is 38 millimeters. The crystal is sapphire. The movement inside these watches is the caliber L896.5, and they retail for about $4,300. But I imagine if they show up on Joma Shop, you might be able to get them for half of that. So there you have it, you are now caught up on the news. Thanks for watching.